Maybe let me give you a couple of things, and you can say there'll be more of this or less of this. Okay. Uh, Internal meetings,
More.
external meetings,
More.
in office time,
Same.
uh, dashboards,
Less.
office parties.
More.
Ooh, right. Yeah, everyone's saying good.
Welcome back to the Decidr room. I'm Paul Chan, and I'm joined by my co-CEO, David Brudenell, and we're going to be talking about a bunch of interesting things in episode 2.
We made it. Look at us.
There's a lot of talk at the moment about job loss, and this is something that we talk about quite a lot. But as someone who's been analyzing the concept of a role and the concept of all the work that's done, separating out the difference between knowledge work versus physical work, even though knowledge workers have to sit in front of a keyboard, and all people are linear. So at the end of the day, at any point in time, there is tasks being done if they're defined pretty well. What do you think the meaning of a role is as we start moving into the age of AI?
Role, job. I mean, depending on the country that you're approaching it. A task for me is the atomic unit of work. So it's the smallest thing that a human can do, easily a knowledge worker, as you said. And although database stuff gets even smaller, it would be a task, to give you some task examples, it would be filling out a contact record or making a call or doing a reconciliation, those types of things. Now, I know that it has multiple steps in it, but for humans, I think it's probably something in between, greater than one step, less than 10.
Yep. So I think, I mean, this is obviously with a lot of work that we've done with ontologists and an incredible amount of analysis of incredible databases like ONET that spends a lot of money in the US to define the concept of a role.
Yeah, it might be worthwhile talking about ONET, maybe just going a little bit deeper into that, because it's really interesting.
I mean, ONET is sponsored by the government, and effectively it's a very large database that defines all of the roles in America. So all of the jobs and all the job titles that are defined as a role. It is kept up to date and constantly republished. And it's just gone over 1,000 roles in the last couple of years. So that sounded strange to me when I first came across it, and I thought there'd be millions of roles, right? But actually, when you define things well enough, and I think the way that I'll define a role that is pretty hard to beat when you look at a database like ONET, it's defined as tasks that somebody does, but actually those tasks are more what we would call workflows. And some of those workflows are pretty specific and some of them are pretty general. And I think the most fascinating thing about thinking deeply about the future of work and what knowledge work is, when I look at that database, there is probably 100 to 150 roles in which I would have heard of many times over the years, and most businesses would have a lot of those roles. But if I keep reading and going through the role list, then there are things that are very hyper-specialized, which I am certainly not that au fait about, and I couldn't actually tell you what they are unless I read them.
And they nuclear engineers or scientists or
types of scientists, and even a beekeeper, or obviously all the different trades, and certain trades get broken out into very specific industries, and that changes for the airline industry or other types of industries. However, the important part, I think, for everybody to think through is the vast majority of roles that people would know about, and the vast majority of roles that are the ones that are common to all businesses, are probably the roles that are in many cases the most at risk, in the sense that the jobs and the people who do those tasks in many cases will still be required. However, just like the manufacturing space did, we're going to explode the component parts of these roles, these tasks, and we're going to have the opportunity to have a human intelligence or an artificial intelligence do that job.
Yeah.
And we're also going to be able to move into a non-linear meaning it isn't based on a schedule that is linear to a person. It's based on something that's triggered that can be acted upon straight away. So many records in a database, for example, could be considered a task for each attribute that you enter or each field. And many of those fields could be worked on at the same time.
It's interesting if you go back up to like the concept of a job. I think, it's largely been there's been a false economy created with job types out there, right? It's like just that whole statement is within the whole U.S. economy, and it's used for the census, right? It's used for the IRS. It's used for the government. Like it sits at really the base of an entire economy, right? ONET is to contrast that with job boards with infinity numbers of job titles out there that's largely been controlled by humans who have kind of exploded out. So, we have Career one of our job partners. One of the things I learned early on when they were sharing kind of some of their database knowledge with us was like a simple job can have innumerable numbers of variants on it. Marketing manager has 320 stuck in my brain. But when you distill it down to the atomic units of tasks, right? What I'm hearing from you is even a marketing manager, there's a subsection of tasks which are similar to an accounting manager versus a data entry person. There's this almost like the central number of tasks that everybody has, and that's shared across an organization, which is potentially taken out by AI. Then also it's the tasks which are done most often, would that be a good way to think about it, that are at risk now within every business? So like, what would be in your mind if you're going to stack rank the job types that are most at risk, and then maybe one step down is like, what do you think are the tasks which are most easily offloaded for AI?
Look, I think the easiest way to answer that question is when we talked about a list of 1,000 roles and most people knowing about 100 to 150.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the vast majority of those roles are the ones that are most at risk. And they're not at risk, as I said, of being replaced completely. They're actually, if you want to think about them as an opportunity, they're the ones that are going to be broken up, and whole new types of specializations and whole new types of opportunities are going to occur, because the abstraction, and this is a really important point that I think should be really thought about, is if you have domain knowledge in an industry, so inside the medical space, you might have this representation in the language of something called a patient, but when they go to pay the bill, they're actually defined as a customer. And in the system, they could be in two systems, one as a patient and one as a customer. But it's the same person. So in most cases, if you have enough time and energy in it, and we do have enough time and energy now, because once upon a time, up until this moment, that was the best way to actually run a business. And that was the best way to actually construct those roles. And that's why there are so many job titles, because the domain knowledge of that particular industry, the way in which they refer to, for example, patient management. So you may become a patient manager. And these are the things that become codified in the industry. But actually, if you reduced it to the tasks, there's 75 to 80%, sometimes even more of those tasks that are exactly the same.
Similarity,
Entering a name, updating a state, changing a status. These are all things that are in every single entity type or every single type of language object. And we don't speak perfect language, we speak appropriate language. And appropriate language would be like an adult changing the way they spoke to a child, because they would use words that were maybe less complex, or certainly wouldn't hopefully use as much profanity. And also, when you think about as a business person presenting to an audience, you change the way in which you talk to that audience, which is the tacit knowledge, the way in which you understand the highest impact for that communication requirement to be achieved is definitely going to be achieved that way. So if somebody walked up and adopted something like, I'm a customer, please, can you look at my customer record? And you talk to someone who's in a doctor's waiting surgery, who's a receptionist, she's not necessarily going to understand what you're talking about, even though it's literally in front of her. And so we have that communication challenge. And when you think about the jobs at risk are the ones that, let's say, can't break free of that specific type of language and realize that they're very skilled and they actually are incredibly capable of doing many more things than they can imagine across many industries. And as that particular task type becomes something that is even more hyper specialized, the individual person might be available as a important human taste maker, or providing back, for example, certain types of feedback that wouldn't have been used before, like the patient is distressed, something that a human really has to look at, and an AI doesn't have that opportunity.
Yeah, but do you think that's how it's going to play out? I mean, that's an optimistic view, right?
I'm a very optimistic.
I know you are an optimistic guy.
It plays out like that in the end.
Well, yeah, it does. The end, but they're not the ones. But they're not the ones buying the. They're not the ones buying the task that's being bought by the enterprise, right? And so, like, maybe read another way, is it actually specialization becomes a burden in the first wave, and generalization becomes an asset, meaning there's a person who can type switch between patient and customer quickly for, I don't know for what reasons. Maybe it's education, maybe it's capability, maybe it's experience, maybe it's a combination of all three, maybe it's something else. But do you think that's how it's going to play out?
No, I think every type of structural change, and we're going through a structural change, an existential change to our reality. So this is really profound. Like the internet arrived, AI's arrived, and if I was a travel agent and I'd never seen someone go through an online checkout form, booking a flight, and I saw that for the first time, I think that's what it's going to feel like for a lot of people who are going to realize that workflow wasn't going to be done by everybody overnight, but what was happening was that person had the ability to say, I did that, I have that capability, I have that interface, I have access to those flights. Why is everyone having access to that now? And why can anyone at any time, 24 hours a day, log on and do that themselves? Now that's going to change in a way that is even, unfortunately, a little more scary. So I'm not trying to scare people, but I'm just telling you what it'll feel like. When you go to a travel agent or you went to a bank teller and you said, can you move some money between my account? You could do that with natural language. You could do that pretty much in your own way. So you could say, you probably may not have used the word account, and say, can you move that between this and this?
Those 3 nickels from one account to the other, if it was me earlier.
You could go to the travel agent and say, can you book me a flight to Melbourne or San Francisco? That was a pretty easy thing. You could do it with very limited understanding, and that was because it was a full service capability. We're going to go, we've then gone to a self-service. So we taught the whole world through the internet to use interfaces, but the payoff was you could do it 24 hours a day. You got to see the flights. And for
larger inventory access.
Yeah. And for your, if you're Amazon, you pretty important, you change the world. You worked on the same principles every time. People want things faster. So delivery time should probably never go down. And you could think bigger. So it's like, well, at some point I might have to have my own airplanes. And that just wouldn't be the normal starting point for a small retail store, even if they had big aspirations.
Yeah. The leap from books to owning your own airplanes is like, so it's a long horizon, that's for sure.
So at some point, I'm 100% sure that there was a person in a Barnes and Noble, one of those bookstores, and we know that there was a lot of them, and then there became very few of them, and there's still some around, but there's not anywhere near as many as there were. But a lot of those people did end up now in Amazon at some point. Some of them had the opportunity to do things they never would have had the opportunity to do. And maybe they started selecting and managing collections and ranges that were just phenomenal and lived an incredibly interesting life. And then there are a whole bunch of other people that unfortunately couldn't make that adjustment, that language change, that have that opportunity. And sometimes that opportunity was literally just them doing what you would expect most people to do, which is either resist the change or have to embrace it. And normally we're going to go through that again, I think now, which is a lot of people are going to be forced to face the reality that there will be constant job cuts. There will be constant. That is going to be normal. And that happened before. We've been through this before.
Yeah, I mean, we have. I think it may manifest slightly differently than it has in the past. Like we saw, if we look back to the internet age, and maybe internet plus 5-10 years, right? So that, first of all, that's a lot of time between people first got it. And it, if we think back, it was still pretty pervasive all the way through the people, right? The population. You just had we went through this like interesting era of discovery on the internet to more transactions to like full immersion in there. I think AI is looking a little bit different than that. It's much more compressed. And when you think about the self-service, and I like that analogy of going like full service to self-service to full service again, is in self-service, it was largely domain specific and largely consumer, I think. For this one, it's interesting because it feels, we can debate it out, it feels like it's more enterprise now at the moment. The consumer side is still emerging. People are talking, using it as a psychologist. They're using it as price comparison. They're using it for a whole bunch of reasons, but that really hasn't played out yet because the revenue is just subscriptions now from the major foundation models, but more so on the enterprise, right? And so, I mean, how do you think, like, maybe I'll stop there, is you think it's going to play out differently? Because the internet was largely consumer first and enterprise second.
Look, one thing I always find hard to imagine, I mean, this is me personally, there's an ongoing survey by Microsoft, global survey on usages of AI in different countries. So at the consumer level, and Australia sits just under 40%, and the highest is, I think, Abu Dhabi or Dubai in the 60s. And their government gave every citizen AI, so either it's 100% or 40% don't use it, so one or the other. So at the end of the day, I could never understand what the other, 60% of Australians are doing.
I think they might be really happy. That's
for me personally. So that's okay. That's an empathetic. I can understand it intellectually. I understand that it's real.
Yeah.
That in the business we were part of before, which was intelligence in another name called Insights, where you could find out pretty much percentages of any particular type of usage of any type of industry. And it was never, ever even close to 100% ever, almost anything. Even banking, I think, got to 90 something, the highest I ever saw.
Right.
So 90 something was phenomenally large. So I remember mobile phones were non-existent, and then you don't exactly remember why or when, but there is a point in time which is very short, definitely less than, it probably feels like a year, and it goes from non-existent to something that is, sort of critical. And so if you circle back to thinking about people who are going to, on the negative side, there is going to be a lot of businesses. When you talk about an enterprise, I'll just say an organization, and an organization is not a person. An organization is set up to achieve goals. And if it's a business, one of those main goals is to serve customers and then profit from that. And that means that you are subject to competition. And so consumers are not subject to competition. They're not they might be comparing use of AI, but they don't win or lose customers and win or lose market share based on the ability to go from full service, kind of like over annoying forms now to, can you just do this for me, or can, move back to a natural language, full service opportunity. And as soon as that happens, that's going to be a competitive requirement. You can't pretend that everyone's just going to use your forms. And that's exactly what happened before with the banks having an online bank. That was a big deal back then.
It was, the first one in, and then everyone piles in.
Well, it's competition. It's driven because you have to beat somebody else, and because if you put your head in the sand or don't change, whereas obviously for a consumer, that they can put their head in the sand and they can not talk to AI. And I can tell you now, I'm 100% sure, 99.9% sure of this. Some AI has changed people's lives. Like, I believe it has changed their lives. I think they feel more empowered. They feel less scared. They feel more brave. They can be more brave. I mean, I think that is an incredible change. And even if that was only for 10% of the population, it justifies in some cases the valuations. But if we were to talk about enterprises, and as I said, an organizational design, it's competitive and it has to compete. And if you have to compete, which is a very, very important concept, then the marketplace in a free economy is going to drive, let's say, new innovation. And one of those innovations is artificial intelligence now. You can't ignore it.
It's interesting. I was thinking about this one story. I was taking an Uber in a couple of days ago, And I always like to chat to my Uber drivers because I don't know, this is a thing I like to do. And you're talking about AI, and he's like, "Oh, I heard about this Claude thing," and I was thinking about how do I learn about this? And he would have been in his 50s or so, friendly guy, and we were talking about ChatGPT versus Claude, and I was espousing what I like Claude much better than AI. And I've heard you talked about today. You went to Perplexity, so maybe we should dive into that because you are right at the frontier. My daughter actually likes Perplexity as well. She talks about her OK Computer often. But I was talking with him, and he's like, "Oh, how do I learn about it? I was going to take courses on Coursera." And I said to him, like, "Well, why don't you just ask Claude to tell you how to use Claude?" And for him, that was like a mind explosion. But why I brought that up is it's quite interesting. That's why I brought up internet was consumer, and then the enterprise followed. And this one, it looks like enterprise, then consumer follows. It's quite an interesting view if you kind of look at inside out versus outside in. It got me thinking about that conversation. Got me thinking about, well, what are the earliest kind of usages, or what emerged first in the early internet thing? So eBay. Remember like sniping back in the day? And there's all these sniping tools that were out there where you could get the coolest.
I think it still probably exists.
It probably still exists. Ticket Tech.
I'm still nervous about my domain names all the time.
But if for all those dozens of listeners who are thinking about what is eBay and what is sniping, back in the day you could post something on eBay and people would wait all night, right? And auction. It was only auction, and so people created new essentially software that in the last millisecond would put in a bid and you'd get the thing that you wanted. Why I'm talking about that, it feels like a lot of these AI point solutions that are being developed today, they feel like the sniping tools of eBay, but for enterprise. Like all these, like what seems like will quickly be put out of place by changes in the organization or changes in the software. That'll happen. I thought I'd bring it up because it was, we're talking about this transformation of tasks and jobs, and it feels like the equivalent of eBay sniping tools are what's appearing now, which is like these little weird task things that are optimized for the business today, not for what you said earlier, which is a task or tasks in workflows will not look the same in an AI future as they do today.
Mm-hmm.
Comment.
There's an incredible number of questions in that sort of in those sentences.
Question number one: do I still snipe on eBay?
So I want to just quickly go back to the Uber driver thing because it made me think of something, and I think it's important to talk through the difference between consumer adoption and enterprise or business adoption. I think they're two different adoption curves, and one adoption curve is much, let's call it, nicer than the other.
They're pretty darn steep. I mean, both of them.
Well, I would say adoption at the moment is still much higher from a real value perspective on the consumer side. I think it's like outrageously higher compared to a business. Now, if you went to an individual role inside a business, it now could be incredibly high. For some people, they are like, particularly anyone who's asking, I'll tell you about Perplexity in a second because it's the same as this, but anyone who's asking AI to do multiple tasks where they're not defining the task and they're defining it at a higher level, like make me a website, or
which is most people, by the way.
Which is most people. And one of the things that I learned in terms of my own optimization of AI, and I do shit pretty hard, was I had to break up the prompts into many smaller prompts because I wanted it to provide a certain amount of competence and efficacy in the output. And then as I did that, I realized I literally have this whole process in which I have to tell it to continue in the prompt. And I also don't like using Claude Code or Claude Work as much because I like to control the tasks. And I don't mind to ask it what the tasks are before it does them but I also have a very clear view of the ones that I would like. And so when it comes to outputs and making a lot of outputs, the reason I moved to Perplexity Computer is Perplexity Computer works a little bit more like a feed where it still does tasks in the background. It still has the ability to do way too many tasks that I can't control. But what it does do is it allows me to say, do these 10 tasks first, and then with those 10 tasks, do these 10 tasks, and with those 10 tasks, do these 10 tasks, which gives me infinitely more control. And also, it means that I don't have to keep coming back to it and say, please continue.
Yeah.
And so that's a very big thing. And that goes all the way through to the exporting of the artifacts, the creating of the spreadsheets. I mean, I'm a big output person.
Is that a sign, like, as you're going through and describing essentially the task sequencing that they're doing, is that a peek into, do you think that's a peek into what the future jobs are? Are you encoding, like, there's a question, like, you're encoding tacit knowledge, your tacit knowledge into that, which is not just the prompts, but the sequence of the prompts and the timing of those prompts.
We have a very different, I have a very different perspective, which is you share with, this happens to be what we're doing. So we should have a slightly different view. And looking at Claude Code, which I do all the time, do tasks, or looking at Perplexity or OpenAI's products, I can tell you right now that it's like a tacit knowledge worker. Exactly the same. It's literally like a person, and it does smart things, silly things, and it keeps going, and then it stops and it talks to itself, and it probably shouldn't have done that. I don't think that is bad. I don't want to have another situation in which I'm replicating the good and the bad. I'd like to try and filter out all of the good and say, let's now build a workflow, really small ones that we have incredibly high confidence it'll be done the same way every single time. So it sort of looks like a task. But when you combine all those tasks together, it looks like a confident flow. And it means that it doesn't have to go off and decide what to do, which again, you can always start that way. But once you've actually, you get into the detail of knowing what it is that's good, you should codify that and you should productize that. And very, very soon, that's through platforms like ours going to be something that you can install, which goes beyond a skill. It goes to a specific goal that is defined in quantities. And so that means everything changes, because all products aren't your best efforts like software is. All products move to, this will achieve the goal at a certain level if you pay this amount of money.
Dishwasher is a good example, right? We can wash the dishes, or we could put it in. It's got a defined work.
Robo vacuum cleaners. I've just got one for the first time, and I want to tell you that is the perfect example, because it will show you the actual track.
Yes.
You can optimize that. You can tell it to do certain things.
Yes.
But it works within extremely defined parameters, and it does it the same every single time. So at some point you watch it in amazement. At some point you think it does get stuck in, and mine
gives me anxiety. Mine's named what's our vacuum name? Like Igor, and we put some googly eyes on it. But I get a lot of anxiety when it's always going underneath the table for some reason, and it gets very close to the stairs in the house that go down the garage.
I would never put it on when I'm there, because that would be a bad idea, and it would completely distract me, and I would observe it the whole time.
Let's talk about in the Decidr room basement. Let's talk about what an organization looks like. So maybe let's start with what it doesn't have.
To think about what an organization is, I think that is like a static view and a definition that will make sense, meaning it's a normally defined as a group of people coming together to achieve a shared goal. So it's an easy definition.
That's what it does have. Okay.
But that's a static state, and it's not really what an organization is. An organization is at its highest order, its highest achievement is what we're trying to achieve, which is a level of autonomy in which it becomes invisible. So we're sitting here in the second most complex operating systems organizations that have ever been discovered in the universe, which is the female body and the male body. And there is incredibly large numbers of simultaneous processes that are happening that we are completely unaware of. And it allows us to do nothing more than focus on some words and be generally aware of what's going on, but doesn't make us aware of anything else. And that is, in my mind, the platonic representation of what an organization should be. And that's something that you couldn't really have as a goal before, even in the best well-run organizations, because people getting together and having that level of connection is almost impossible.
There's glimmers of it, though, in large enterprises, like in ultra-large enterprises.
Look, I think there's more glimmers of it in single-room organizations where the feeling in the room and the understanding of what the room is doing isn't communicated through screens or anything else. It's extremely human, and so there's been a lot of disconnection with that, with a lot of people, and let's say an incredibly large change to work, which has already happened since COVID, and an incredibly large, instant, almost overnight adoption of remote work through telepresence. So trying to simulate meetings and in some cases doing an incredibly good job at it, in some cases creating all sorts of new types of challenges. And I think that's exactly what we're just about to go through again now, where it's already happening in some areas of the business where they can say, can you go and do this? And you watch it go and do it. Now, at some point, you aren't going to say, can you go and do this? It's just going to go and do it.
Maybe let me give you a couple of things, and you can say there'll be more of this or less of this. Okay. Internal meetings.
More.
External meetings.
More.
In office time.
Same.
Dashboards.
Less.
Office parties.
More.
Ooh, right. Yeah, everyone's saying good. Performance reviews.
Always. Constant.
Okay. Responsibility, more or less.
More visible.
Okay. Virtual meetings.
Less.
Customers per business.
Overall, probably less.
Decisions that a human needs to make in a day.
Actively more.
Do you think the types of interactions between colleagues will become more formal or less formal?
Higher level of shared knowledge, so it might seem more formal. Lower level of pretense, so it could seem less formal.
Okay. What about, and last one, let's talk about power. So more employee power or more employer power, whichever you want.
Less power to the larger structure, more power to the orchestrated intelligence, so the operating system, the organizational operating system, much more.
The depth and breadth of that, or
it's what I call mutually assured intelligence. You don't really have the option to bullshit people anymore, because they're going to be able to work that out at some point.
Okay. And what about, will there be, this could be an and or an or, so it's not really in the same format, but do you believe that, or do you see that employees will have their own operating systems as well as the organizational operating system, or will it be more Borg-like from an enterprise side? Will I bring let me rephrase that. Let's imagine, it's a stretch. Let's imagine I have capability and I go into an org, I'm hired into a new company. Do I bring my context layer, my org layer?
I think that's a really good question, but I'd like to try and frame it a little bit more in the sense of the way people may understand it. I think an organization, if you're in an executive situation or an executive role, or played a type of executive role, I think your understanding of the organization will change quite dramatically. I think as someone who contributes to an organization, like an individual contributor, I think larger organizations call them, they will become more pronounced and more important in the sense that it is a very clear difference between a human task and an AI task.
Mm-hmm.
And being an individual contributor, which will then eventually get back to the executive level, there'll be a separation between executive tasks that are human versus executive tasks that are AI driven.
Okay. And then one last question, which will be a segue into some more federal stuff, sovereign stuff, which I want to talk about, is do you think that in the future, let's just use, it doesn't matter which country, but a country, do you think there'll be more companies or less companies?
A lot more.
Okay. Why?
Companies.
Why
Because the only thing that's held back people from having more shareholdings in more companies is sophistication and capability. And that is about to change dramatically. And that is no different to thinking about a house and a person having a letterbox that it shares with everybody else in the house versus having an email address or now a mobile phone or a way to be communicated with directly. I think the individual will have incredibly large numbers of shareholdings in organizations. I think that will become.
Do you think that'll be a market? It's like a stock market, or it'll be a secondary?
It'll be both. There'll definitely be a stock market for the large ones, as you'd expect.
Yeah.
The amount of smaller organizations that could be profitable and providing dividends to non-active, as in non-participating in the jobs roles shareholders.
Yep.
I think that's pretty exciting. I think that's my big belief versus UBI. I'm not a UBI believer. I believe everyone will have shareholdings in these new agentic organizations, and that will provide them with what I think they're calling it universal. It's not basic, but it's like the opposite, like
ultra.
Yeah, it's something like universal. Need to find it.
Super income.
Yeah, it's like a not unlimited, but as I said, the biggest problems will be more what you do with your time, as opposed to how I'm going to pay the bills.
Yeah. So what's how are boards absorbing this new technology? I say absorption is not high, but effort is high. And boards is certainly all the people that I speak to. They're definitely thinking about it. It is definitely, if not the most important agenda item, it would be top 2 or top 3, probably top 2. I think that boards are they're exploring right now. They're trying to figure out exactly how to understand it. Step 1, and then number 2 is a board's fiduciary obligation is governance, right? So they're not actually attached to the management layer of the business. And so I think boards are first trying to understand what's going on so they can listen to the operations or management to make sure that they're not blowing smoke up into the board, but better yet, are making the right investments based on the trends that are happening in technology. So what do I mean? What am I trying to get to? It is early for boards. I think that it's a bit ironic given that boards have some of the most rich tacit knowledge of any employee. In actuality, they're probably the best placed people to build the context layer and build the AI org, right? Inform the models of their own experiences, but they know the least of how to actually work with the technology. So I don't know. That's my take. What about you? What do you think?
I think about this quite often, and I've had the opportunity to spend some time with different board members.
Air conditioning.
And I think there's a lot just to quickly unpack. The first thing is, and I may have said this before, but we are in the very early phases of the innovator phase on a forced existential change that everybody has to deal with called AI, which means everybody is in the explore phase. I've discovered all the answers and I now need to execute well on known, understood principles on confidence level. So no board should feel bad and no executive team should feel bad, but not acknowledging and understanding that is unfortunately what the hubris is in most boards and in most executive teams, which is we've got this, it's under control, because having it under control, even though nobody has, everybody has to go through some really difficult factual challenges, which is, it starts with what we started the conversation around, which is, well, Block or Wise Tech, they've let a lot of people go. Do we need all our people? Now, a lot of executives on very large companies, the smaller ones we can park, sort of move aside, but the ones that are reasonably large, that's like saying to somebody, do we need our pancreas or gallbladder? I'm not too sure. Can we get rid of that? Now, you might get rid of it and then nothing might happen for a little while, and then all of a sudden there's some disastrous realities. Those disastrous realities, I think, have already started to happen. And I think there are some things that are coming through where, and by the way, this is not just isolated to the internet. This is quite normal. It happens a lot with PE companies that go in, take out some of the most important people and things and don't really understand it, because if it doesn't pass the test, or you can't stand up as an executive and present it, and really, as I was saying before, those individual contributors, they're not really the ones standing up there and saying, this is what holds this whole thing together, or this is why these customers are staying with us, or whatever it might be. That's the first thing. And then the other big thing I would say is, you mentioned that the board is really around governance. I think it's always been larger than that. It's to do with self-preservation, it's to do with performance, and it's to do with winning.
Of the company or of the company? Yes,
of the company. And when it's not, then it's exactly what you just heard. It's about their reputation. It's about whether they believe that they know what's going on. And the truth is, nobody should feel, as I said, bad that they don't know what's going on. But not doing the work now and not doing exactly what you were sort of, I think, saying, which is, we have to actually look to the wisdom of past experience, the people that have been through the digitization through the internet, people that have been through PE disasters, people that have been through the opposite to that, the things that have done really well by reducing a huge amount of headcount that wasn't necessarily required, that made the business bloated, less effective, less performant. So these are all things that I would assume an experienced executive and an experienced board member should have fairly large amounts of experience with, and that's what we really need to depend on right now.
Yeah, you'd hope that. I was actually in the elevator looking at where you get all your news, and I saw on the in the television panel that reverse mentoring was there, and I actually thought of you when it came up, because that's your general news source. But I also thought, I think it's a good idea. It's constant for boards to bring in experts, right, into the frame, but paradoxically, reverse mentor of bringing an AI native person. They may not know what to use it for, but they know how to use it. That could be the most powerful thing for boards to bring in, as opposed to a big four or somebody else who's going to charge them 7 figures and give them a nice presentation, as you said, make them feel good. But I don't know. I've been on boards. I interact with many different types of boards as customers, as doing speaking, all that stuff. And it's amazing. Like, I'm talking to these people who are vastly more intelligent than I am. And it's a bit of a shame that they can't actually put any of that into something to be able to interact with it. So,
I could have made many jokes, but I didn't.
Thank you.
I wanted
to episode 3.
Look, I think we obviously have this incredible perspective because we're right in the middle of many conversations, and there's a couple of things that I think really people should be thinking about when it comes to just expanding the language. So this has incredible amounts of deja vu for me, because in the early days of the internet, people used it as the verb and the noun and everything. And it was like, are you doing internet? What internet are you doing? Now, you laugh, but if I went back through a lot of the sentences,
most people.
If I went back through the sentences that we just both said, we're using the word AI in about 300 different contexts.
Yes.
And when we don't have the language for it, so we don't have the concept of e-commerce, we don't have the concept of all of these things that we started the conversation on, which I think is the most important thing, which is talking about what a task is. and talking about a task that's being done and inferred with human intelligence, and a task that can now be inferred with artificial intelligence. And for us, if you codify as much of that, then it should end up as schema intelligence. And I would take schema intelligence every day of the week over either of those, because both of those are disparate and they don't exist until there's an output.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, unless you really get into the details, which is unfortunate because a board asks for the details, and an executive asks some other person for the details. And in my experience, particularly in very, very large numbers of market research projects, all of the watering down and all of the distillation and simplification and oversimplification to then say, can you give me the one insight? Can you give me the one thing to do?
Silver bullet, yes.
I think that is where we're going to struggle, because that is very normal human behavior. There is not one type of implementation, and technically going through this process, a company is going to realize that it, although has very, very similar tasks to every other company, it needs to be and is a unique variant. And there is no other company like it. That is something that is going to then keep going down into every role, and then the redesign of those workflows. And a business has always been a set of processes. It's never been anything more, never been less. And they happen in a certain period of time. And hopefully there's incredible amounts of value that are delivered to customers through their products. And we need to get into the details of saying, what is AI in the sense of an intelligence output, and what is a human intelligence output, and how do we compare those in terms of cost and price and quality, and then how do we assemble that into something that is value? And I think as soon as and I think it's happening, but ultimately, frankly, it's not happening by the boards and the executives, because they're not geared that way. They're geared to have that summary so that they can take action and they can use executive judgment. I think that those things are going to exist and be required forever. But right now, we need to get into the details. The details are really where some people are going to make fortunes, because they're going into the details, and a lot of boards and a lot of executives, unfortunately, committing their company to possibly a very fast death. They're not taking some action a lot faster.
Yeah. Well, I mean, getting into the details, that means we probably have enough for the next episode.
I don't think we won't have enough for another 100 episodes.
So advice for CEOs, like how should CEOs be thinking about jobs? Let me start. What you talked about earlier, right? We're still in the exploratory phase of businesses. So I would be, for CEOs, I would be making sure that the employees of my organization understand how to use the technology and are experimenting with the technology, but that experimentation was guided through their work lens. So I would give my advice to CEOs would be start to think about, it's not give everyone the tool and just like hope for the best. I don't think that's a particularly good strategy. It would be, well, what are the key strategic outcomes of the organization? And how would you use AI to achieve those? So give some sort of direction. And that could be maybe not at a company level, but maybe at a function level in the org. That's how I'd do it. But what would you do?
Look, we are co-CEOs, so let me talk from and share some of what our reality is. And this is not really advice. This is just what I can now say is observation around. We have the benefit as well as the curse of working in Horizon 1 and Horizon 3.
Mm-hmm.
Both of us are not in Horizon 2, because my job in Horizon 3 is to bring that as quickly as I can into Horizon 2, but possibly even to Horizon 1. And yours is to make sure that the orchestration, the execution, the excellence, performance is second to none. And so I'm trying to disrupt in some ways, and you're trying to make sure that it galvanizes and becomes performant.
Mm-hmm.
I think that tension is something that a lot of businesses don't have the opportunity to have for a couple of reasons. Either there's a singular leader, and a singular leader, which we've both been, is obviously going to focus on the horizon that they're most comfortable in. But in reality, the vast majority of executives that are successful are Horizon 1, maybe Horizon 2. There's an incredibly large amount of past data, past understanding. And unfortunately, we're going through a phase now where the writing is on the wall and it's very, very clear that that structure is going to have to change. And that's the first time it's changed. I think, as we mentioned last time, Jack Dorsey started talking about organizational design. Atlassian's now come out and talked about organizational intelligence. We're talking about different role structures. We're talking, and when I say where, people are talking crazy things like everything's a flat structure now, or everything is going to be hyper specialized to the level in which you don't have an organization at all. So these are unknowns, and I don't. I mean, we obviously have a very clear view on doubling down on the thing that I think has made the modern world, which is the organization itself. And I think this is only going to end up better. But change is when we start, and we'll talk more about the every person, the every role, not just the executives, not just our role. But let's think about it from a slightly different but important perspective, which is people are going to turn up to work and still do their job. There's no chance that someone is just going to stop. If they've been given more tools, they're either going to use them and be more productive. I mean, so productive that the work they were doing before they can do in 2 days instead of 5. And I think that's happening. Now, does that mean that the business has to be redesigned? Absolutely. Like, it's a design problem. Does that mean that what used to take 5 days and it was a fair amount of work and it was a decent amount of pay, can that now be condensed, and possibly is it possible to do all of that work and earn as much money in 2 days? Or split the difference, or to 5 times much, twice as much in any one. So these are all the things that nobody knows, because unfortunately for every person that comes to work and doubles their productivity, someone comes to work and actually doesn't have that effect at all and doesn't even use AI. And it's not even because necessarily they're not able to use it. It's just that their job design and the role and the way in which that their existing tools, their existing business or existing workflows work, they can't unfortunately use it.
Yeah, it's almost and I mean, from the employee perspective as well, like I would agree with what you're saying. It's almost like everybody needs to get on the tools now, because there's a battle between tension between like the executive and finding out what is a reasonable amount of output per employee per task, right? The next question I would have is like, well, how congruent or how transferable are task groups within a particular employee? Can they only do one? Can they do different types, so on and so forth? And then you have the employee, which is as quickly as you possibly can find out. It used to be, there's this saying, is like, you need to chase your talents, right, to find a good career. I've updated that in some of my writings, but like, chase your talent tasks. Go and find what are the tasks that you're exceptionally good at, and how AI propels those tasks to even higher levels. I'll use my own experience. Like I use AI every day, and I feel like what I was able to achieve in a week, I can now achieve in, and like, I'm not exaggerating, like an hour in some cases, at a much higher level of potency, higher level of quantity, quality, intelligence, matrix. Just, obviously my language is not like right now. I need to work on that. But like the output is, I'm constantly amazed at how much I can produce and the quality of it. And so I think it's really interesting, that tension between both employees and the executive now, and how that's going to start to come together. Because if we go back to where we talked about it in the middle, is if you have that individual and you have your talent tasks and you are really, really learning how to be capable, you have your own business, you are superior. You're actually elevated beyond an employee in an organization, and you're probably going to earn more by providing a service to that as a service, or that as a product to an organization.
Well, there could be people amongst us working on things like that. But I will say a couple of things.
Just a couple, because we got to go.
I'll finish up on this tiny little, I think, kind of insight that people can think about, because I think you have just nailed it. I think you literally articulated but let me try and frame it slightly differently to see whether this resonates with people. I think it will really deeply resonate. If I can, and let's not say a month or even a week in an hour, let's say that I can do incredibly large amounts more work that I understand and I have incredible interest in and know what is good, and push the AI to make better because I already am putting pressure on myself to constantly improve. And instead of being roughly 30 tasks or 30 workflows actually that most roles are designed, by this official ONET database, what if you could break that up like car parts have been broken up, and you exploded the roles that were once done at one person for 30 workflows, and some of those workflows were only done once or twice a year, and some are done 20 times a day. And you now broke those up and said, no, we're going to break up those even up again. But then we talk about what you talked about, which is task types. Now, it is going to be pretty obvious that that is possible to do now. And the way in which you can bring those together is in these new agentic organization. And if you can buy those tasks from people who, again, just constantly work on it, then you're going to find that they do many things in an hour, but their hours then move to the next hour and they're going to do even more things. And so what you get is that magical economies of scale, which means the quality is going to keep up, the demand will get higher, and the price will come down. And that is the almost absolutely going to happen if what we've just described plays out, of which I'm pretty sure it's going to. So it's a pretty exciting future we're looking at. Unfortunately, and there is a downside to this, that is not the way that almost any knowledge work role is designed right now.
So
unless you're a barista.
Unless knowledge work as a barista.
Well, I think that's the more important analogy that you should think about, which is how good can you make a coffee and how many can you make in an hour?
I can't make any good coffee.
You definitely can't.
I like the perfect stuff.
Let's not focus on that as your task type.
Okay, that is definitely not my task type. That might be a good thing to finish on, because it actually sets up maybe episode 3, which we can get into the details around. But
we might have to do that remotely and see how that works.
Yeah, that'd be cool. We could do it overseas version. But thank you, my good friend, for having another chat. Episode 2, it's done. We fixed it in the yoga room in the basement.
I think it felt better in this yoga room and this basement.
The air conditioning's turned off, which makes it a bit more steamy in here, but
the smell of yoga mats is still omnipotent.
It is. Next one, Golden Gate Bridge.
Well, we can make the background anything we like. We'll see how we go.
Fair enough. But maybe we'll actually be there. That'll be all right.
Okay, that's cool. Let's try and do it from San Francisco. Or New York.
1 year. That's it.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.